This is a digital broadcast truck with SMPTE 2110. So that was my original hook. Like, okay, Before that horn interrupted me, I was going to mention this mobile unit is a SMPTE 2110 broadcast production truck, the 45 Flex. Originally, I came here to look at how timing equipment works with modern digital broadcast. But I found out there's a whole nother layer. There's a third team behind the scenes at every one of these hockey games. Every bit is dialed in as the two teams duking it out on ice. And I learned a lot of things I didn't expect as someone who's worked mostly in studio environments. One of the things I found out is that these cables over here are all analog. They're copper lines that go up to different positions in the stadium for sound and for headsets for communications and returns. And I asked, why aren't these all digital? Why don't they just have a fiber? And that's because if you just have one fiber line and that goes down, all of a sudden all your communications are dead. If you have these lines, you can have one or two copper wires go dead and you still can have a show. I learned a lot. And I started off the night talking to the truck's broadcast engineer, Chris Bailey, about how he sets up the timing signal that coordinates everything. But before we get to that, I realized you don't have a good sense of scale for this truck. We're going to spend a lot of time inside it, so to help with that, I made this. It's a flannel graph, and on here you can see the truck from above. Now, obviously, when it's driving around, these two sides aren't popped out like that, but all the broadcast equipment, from mics to cables to cameras, is stored underneath. It's like a whole broadcast facility, and it drives all over the place to multiple productions every week. So I guess I can understand the need for redundancy everywhere. I even got to witness some in-the-field cable repairs, like this one that they did before the game. But anyway, I'm about to show you my dad inside the production room. That's the biggest room that's in green right here, and it's kind of the beating heart of the whole broadcast. My dad put things in context when I asked him what he loved the most about watching the production crew in here.
What I loved is seeing the teamwork behind the production of this live broadcasting. And all you guys that worked in live broadcasting, you know what I'm talking about. But the teamwork is so key. You know, I built a lot of radio studios, facilities, little places for broadcast for sports in radio. And I mean, when you think about the technology you're putting together, you want to see the team use it, and this team is amazing at how they put together the use of all this technology to make a smooth broadcast in real time with a lot of great effects, broadcast, replay. It's fantastic.
And all this stuff wouldn't work without time. This truck is a modern digital production truck using tech called SMPTE 2110. When I first heard about it, I was thinking we'd come in here and see like a bundle of fibers connecting the truck to the building. But that was far from the reality. There is a lot of IP going on, and there's really cool networking, but what fascinated me was how this is really a hybrid setup. Not everything is IP-based, and for good reason. Besides legacy equipment, having that copper redundancy makes sure the broadcast can keep running if one fiber or cable goes bad. So I think the philosophy here is a little different than I'm used to in a studio. But getting back to SMPTE 2110, one important part of every digital broadcast is a network time server. And the truck has redundant time servers because every piece of broadcast gear has to be in sync, from cameras to mixers. And here again, the way they did things surprised me. I expected they were using a GPS signal to get the time of day because in like data centers and broadcast studios, that's just what I'm used to. You put up a little antenna and you get time accurate to microseconds or even nanoseconds in some cases. But that's not how they do it. Chris Bailey, the engineer in charge of the truck, explained why.
Basically, we could do GPS, but in today's instance, we're inside the building. So obviously that doesn't work. And a lot of places we go, we're inside. So we set the clock manually, and they want it to be as close as possible. But with the app on my phone, I am able to get it really close to make them happy, to make Master Control happy with the actual time of the truck.
We were talking about the equipment that's using that clock, and it sounded like as long as they weren't coordinating with multiple trucks, they could be off by a tiny bit and nobody would notice.
It can be a little bit off since we're by ourselves. If we were in a situation where we were connected to other trucks, then we would want it to be exact. But as long as it's very close, basically if they are recording the game and they see the clock on TV and then they look at the clock on their machine, they'd want those to be the same.
You know, the funny thing is, when I was talking about this whole experience with two other engineers, both of them mentioned they also use the Atomic Clock app, so it must be a broadcast engineering thing. I mean, it does help you time the top of the minute really well. But the main thing I learned is they don't need to be within like nanoseconds. They just need a precise timing reference in the truck. And to that end, these Evertz clocks do just fine distributing timing over the IP network using a protocol called PTP. Now, I'm going to get into PTP on my Jeff Geerling channel later this year, so I won't go into depth on it here, but I did see another set of clocks in the Enterprise Center's rack room. Internally, they run a whole separate production for the fans, and since their clocks are permanent up in their rack room, they do use GPS. And I got to talk to Chris Fromm, the engineer who set this stuff up. He explained a little more about why they have to keep time in sync, especially in a stadium with hundreds of displays, camera positions, video switchers, and that entirely separate in-house production team.
It is mission critical that we have the proper time code and we have a redundant system. For some reason that the master clock does die, the backup will kick in and we'll keep all of our equipment in sync. It is very important to keep everything in sync, especially with cameras. So when you cut from one camera to the next, there's no roll or you add a transition like a dissolve. The transition will look proper. If the sync is not right, it'll roll or you go to the next image and it'll be kind of cut in half. So that's what's really important for that. Well, the cool feature of these new, more modern ones is a GPS. Since we're on the top floor, we can easily get a GPS signal, and that'll give us a true world clock. What's nice about having that world clock is everything is based upon the world time. So whenever all of our recording devices are recording the signal, that we can kind of go back, say at 7:39, someone scored a goal, and if we don't have the actual game time clock, we can just pull up the time code. Okay, we think that was around that normal time.
Besides timing, I learned a lot about the history of the Enterprise Center and how they transitioned from analog to HD in 2016. He said digital's been great because the signal is so clean compared to the old days, but ironically, one of the issues they still deal with is dirt.
Every game day, there can be some kind of a challenge with connectivity, and that's usually the stuff that you set up every game. You know, you have this truck rolls in, or the NHL's rolling something in, and we have a lot of other events here. So stuff has to go away, it has to get put back in there. Usually the biggest culprit around here is just dirt. You know, dirty fiber. If fiber is dirty, it's not going to transmit that signal.
We'll get back to the Enterprise Center's production later, but there are essentially 3 productions going on at every Blues game. One for the fans in the building, one for the fans watching on FanDuel Sports Network, and a third one for the away team. The away team either uses a second 45 Flex truck on site, or for some teams they'll roll in their own truck, and things can get pretty crowded. Like just before the game, there's basically a swarm around the truck as all the gear, which is again packed neatly underneath, it's pulled out and installed in the stadium. That includes giant cameras and lenses, tripods, microreceivers, headsets, everything. But that's all under the truck. Before we go around the stadium and see how it all comes together, let me take you on a quick tour of the rest of the truck. There are doors in the front and the back, and right up in the front there are dual 10-ton AC units. And as a little Easter egg, my dad noticed the truck is made by Geerling & Associates, a family-run company that we actually met at NEB last year. But entering the back of the truck, there's an audio booth on the left. This is where they mix together all the live sound, like the crowd mics, the announcers, the ref mic, wireless mics for interviews. It all comes together at this console. And there are enough cables and adapters in there to solve pretty much any audio issue you could ever have in the field. The room is butted right up against the main I/O panel on the outside, since so many analog connections go straight into the CalRec console. Past that room is the big green production room. This is where the producer and director run the whole show. We'll get back to this room later. Next up is tape, and it's a little funny because I didn't see any tape in there, but I guess sometimes the old names just stick. This room has one area for a Robocam, and the rest of it is dedicated to instant replay. But just saying instant replay is kind of selling this room short. We'll spend more time in here later, and we'll find out why. And there might not be tape anymore, but there are plenty of hard drives in these EVS boxes. They even run a little Synology NAS, which I guess takes some backups and holds archive data. We'll get back to how this all comes together, but those drives are part of this blue engineering section. And that's also where I talked to Chris earlier about the clocks. Beyond that is the Iris room, and this is where all the camera feeds come in, and there's a couple guys who are adjusting color, aperture, and all that kind of stuff. Hey, this is Jeff, the editor here, and I marked this on the board as Iris, but it's actually the video room, and it even says that on Mobile TV Group's website. So they do adjust the camera's aperture, or the iris in here, but when I say Iris room in the rest of this video, just think video. And looking into this room, and we'll get to it a little more later, it's crazy how closely everyone is working together. Like, camera ops out in the stadium frame up the action, but they're so dialed in on that, they have these other guys in the truck making sure the cameras have a consistent look and brightness to make sure the production team can switch to any feed at any moment without any jarring transitions. But before we get to all that, to start things off, I asked veteran camera operator Mike Munaco about how he works with the guys in the truck.
We are mainly worried about composition and the next shot that we're going to, we worry about that. The truck, the video guys, the V1, V2, they split on that bench, are really good at painting. It's what's called painting. So we'll go, especially for hockey, we go into some dark areas like on the bench. We go into the ice, which is a lot brighter. They're really good at keeping track of us, and they have multiple cameras to keep track of. So they really do a really good job because we are all over the place.
And I guess I never realized until now, the cameras they use, they go with the truck. They don't just stay in the stadium. They have to be brought up and down almost every single game. Mike said sometimes they can leave them up if there's another game coming up and the truck is staying, but that's not that common. But I asked him, what's the worst part of setting up those giant lenses and cameras?
It's the steps with this equipment. The lenses, these 99s get pretty heavy. So when you get up to the 120, 122s, those are really heavy. And when you have to go up and down the steps, that's where you're really humping the equipment.
I had tried following action in a few soccer games before, and it was not easy to keep things tight and in frame, much less keep an eye on things going on outside my camera's viewfinder. So I asked Mike, how do you do it?
It's many years of practice. You have to get your reps in. Hockey is probably the best and most challenging. It is the most fun to shoot because it's so quick, and you have to stay ahead of what the announcers are talking about. So if a player gets hurt, if there's a play behind the play, and then that's our job is to follow that. So you're probably out of the viewfinder probably 60% of the time, and you're only in the viewfinder looking at what you're shooting about 40%.
There are also some fixed cameras plus the Robocam that we'll get to later, but while these guys are all professional, that doesn't mean they're immune to having a little fun. That night was Halloween night, and Mike's camera position was literally right next to the announcers. So later on during the game, I came back and asked Chris Kerber, who's been calling Blues games over 25 years, how he keeps tabs on everything that's going on behind the mic.
Once Joe starts talking, if there's something I see, I hit the button. I talk back to the truck if we need it. A lot of times Joe is doing most of the talking back and forth with the truck, and I can see when he's got his finger on the talk back button. So when he does that, I make sure I don't. So it's somewhat visual and it's somewhat, auditory the way you look at it. So honestly, from that standpoint, as with Joe right there, you can see it's like broadcasting a game with a 4-year-old, really. That's how that works. That's just kind of the way it is. From a sound standpoint, it doesn't bother you. You're hearing and you pick up cues. Like if Tim Papp says promo, I know I've got to do the promo. If it's something else, then Joe's doing it. If he says what number Blues promo, I know what side of the sheet it is. If he says cart number, I know where to look on that. So there's trigger words that unless I hear those things, I tune everything out. I don't know if I should say that or not, but that's what I'm doing.
We've already met a few of the people that are running the show, and we'll get back to the truck next, but I asked Chris, who's the most important part of the broadcast chain that kind of holds everything together?
I don't think there is one. The chain doesn't work unless every link is strong. Now, look, like anything else, if something has to be decided upon, that's your producer. That's Tim. But there's not a most important person in the chain. Yeah, I've got to be watching what Joe's doing, listening to what Joe's doing. We got to be in tune with the truck, and even other guys in the truck. Bill Nollick does an amazing job with some of the video. You've got Julie and her stats team making the graphics, and they've got to be listening in. If that doesn't work and those real good synergies aren't there, then the fans don't get the full experience. So it really is, and it's not just one. It's not just two, because then if you look behind me, we got all the camera guys, right there as well, and they're in the mix of all that, and they're shooting it. And we've got such a great camera crew and such a veteran camera crew here in St. Louis that sometimes they'll get ahead of even Phil or Tim and make sure that they get something that they need. So it takes a village, and it's a big village. I guess that means it takes a town in this case.
Out in the bowl with the game going on, things get pretty loud. You can feel the raw energy from the crowd. But when I went inside the truck, it's like a completely different atmosphere. This is going to sound kind of weird, but it felt solemn. Like it might not get that loud in there, but during the game, everyone in the truck is quiet, but constantly aware of everything going on around them. I'm going to let part of the game play out here uninterrupted, and then we'll talk about it.
That's exactly what we need to see. That's our take. You know what this team red, and then where click when the detail take, and they're behind the net. Baseball, offense. Detroit's Red Wing game. Roberts score 2 goals like that. Who's going to dump it in? Blues will make the last go and get it early in the hockey game.
Yeah, let's mark that in case you want to put back together. We don't coaches it all too?
This is the production area where they have the video switcher, the producer, director, graphics, and the bug operator. The bug's that little strip of data along the bottom of the screen. The whole game, there's a constant buzz, and you can hear the second announcer, Joey Vitale, at one point asking on talkback about some upcoming footage. I'll get back to that aspect later in the tape room, but in here I want to show you how the intensity ramps up even more when there's a goal.
Holy smokes. 22. Give it to me. Give it to me. That goal was sexy. You got it, Riv.
Take 7, pull. Ready 4.
Rev the Bomarito.
Take 4. Ready 9. Take 9.
Font 2.
Ready 2.
Font 2.
Take 2.
Red font 2. Then we're
Ready red with font 2.
Bomarito
Robocam was due, and here's your Bomarito Robocam. We're going to get
A clean is next.
Here he is playing alongside.
A clean is next.
Just going to pick it up here. A little bit of a cycle chance. Oscar Sundquist's going to find a
sweet
spot.
Late is on.
Another angle. Anywhere else?
Patterson. Here's Sundquist.
This is it.
It's just the chance. Right there. Pucks on in, and he goes sneaky right between the back. That is a Dylan Holloway, who has fared very well against his Vancouver Canucks. The Blues players in his last season. He's got 5 points against this Canucks group. He's off to a great start here.
81.
The Blues need to get going.
Now, if it isn't obvious, everyone on this team is dialed in. On the TV, all you see is the smooth end result, showing a replay that highlights exactly what the announcer's talking about with 2 or 3 different angles and some player reactions. They even integrated a little sponsor call-out in the goal right in the moment for the Robocam. I honestly can't imagine doing all this. Like, just looking at all the screens, I was already pretty overwhelmed. But getting to know all the camera angles, communicating back and forth with the team in the truck, the announcers, and even the camera ops, there's just a ton going on. But little did I know, we're just scratching the surface. Like, during the goal, they talked about the Bomarito Robocam. Well, there's a guy in the truck named Tony West keeping that thing on the action the whole game. He's every bit as focused on getting his shots as everyone else's. I found out he even takes his own camera rig around the stadium pregame to get the shots that they use for B-roll. And I love seeing the little pieces of gear they're using. Like, this remote control box is all business. It doesn't have to look fancy, it just has to take constant use for hundreds of events every year and turn into kind of an extension of the operator's hands. But walking around the Robocam side into the main part of the tape room, there were 3 more guys with the same thing going on, except these guys were operating replay machines. But calling it replay is really selling them short. You might notice everyone's wearing a headset. Well, I got to put one of those on for a few minutes, and that was when I understood what Chris Kerber said earlier. It really is a team effort. You have the director calling shots, you have replay guys mentioning when they have something queued up, you have the announcers talking back to the truck communicating what they're going to be saying. And deeper than that, all these guys have worked with each other long enough, they know. They know what shot to focus on, or whether to go super slow-mo on a certain angle, or play it back full speed. And they're doing this the whole game. And do you remember the Robocam box? Well, the EVS system they used for replays was also pretty Spartan. It honestly looks like an old DOS interface. There's no fancy graphics, just the information these guys need to get their jobs done. I guess with the amount of stuff they have coming in constantly, that's a good thing. But I noticed during pregame and intermissions, if you look at the gear they're using, you can see a human touch. Like Bill Nollick, that's this guy, he rests his hand a certain way while he's working, and over time the surface finish wore off there. He spent so much time on this box, it's kind of adapted to him and he to it. It's gonna sound weird, but when I was watching these guys, it was kind of like they were part of an organism. And that actually carries through to the production room. When you look at the camera angles, these guys' names are right under their feeds, like Tyler and Gummy and Bill. After a goal or a hit or a coach yelling at someone, the announcers might mention it, and immediately the replay guys will have someone go back, grab the right footage, and call it out so that the switcher can play it at a moment's notice. And by the time play starts after a goal, there are already half a dozen highlight clips labeled and saved off ready for highlight reels. Something I didn't realize until now, when you see an instant replay on the broadcast, they don't just hit play on a clip. The replay is guided by the hands of these guys in the truck, and they're controlling the speed ramps, the in and out points, everything, all with these analog controls. It makes me even more interested while I'm watching games at home to see that human touch. It also helped me understand why some sports broadcasts can go so wrong. If you don't have everyone on the same page, you could wind up with a replay angle where it just sits there because someone wasn't ready with that footage. And all that stuff has to run perfectly in sync, which is probably why the engineering area is right off this room with all the main video equipment and networking gear. But there's one more part of the truck I haven't covered, and that's the video room. The guys in the bowl are moving the cameras around, zooming in, framing shots, and getting the angles everyone needs. But in this room, they're constantly keeping up with the cameras, adjusting brightness, and sometimes even color balance. And they even have their own Robocams that they can control in here too, like this one that's in one of the hallways. So we've gone through every room in the truck, and I'm only touching on like 10% of what happens during a game. But did you know there's another full production team with their own producer, Robocams, consoles, and everything for the in-house fan experience? To learn more about that team, I talked to Trevor Nickerson, the VP of Blue Note Productions.
From a team perspective, I oversee the day-to-day broadcast partnership and relationship with FanDuel Sports Network. And not only do we work with them in tandem during the game, we share cameras, we share resources, we share storylines. We sync up with them with moments all the time, so we're both telling the right story at the right time. Once the game ends, we get a melt from them. We get a melt from our in-game show. We get a melt from our specialty cameras that we deploy out during the game. And we bring all of those files back to our server. And now we accumulate this package from the game that is all the camera angles, all the replays, all the content that we would need to build all of our content going forward. So all the things you see in the bowl all come from past games of accumulating all of that content.
Trevor mentioned a melt, but I'd never heard of that, so I asked, what's a melt?
Why it's called a melt, I have no idea. I'm sure it's an old industry term from beta tapes and some sort of a melt term. It's the industry term for when the game ends and you have all of these little clips being stored on the EVS drive. We want all those clips once the game's over, because once you dump it from the truck, it's gone.
I mentioned Chris Frome earlier. He's the engineer behind the in-stadium setup, and I was constantly amazed by the things he was showing us. Like, did you know they have multiple 5G cellular networks running inside the building? I mean, I never thought about it, but when you pack like tens of thousands of fans in a small space and they expect to be able to use their cell phones like nothing's happening, I guess that's how you do it. And he showed us other parts of the building, like they have catwalks that take you out over everything, and that's where I found the official cameras the NHL uses to check if the puck crossed the line. Then there's the Blues organist Jeremy Boyer, who works with the in-house production team to rally the fans or celebrate a goal. The thing I take away from all this is how, even though this production seems larger than life at this point, at every stage I saw little bits of individual personality. From Jeremy's sequin bedazzled jacket to Mike's Halloween decorations, it's a huge group of great talent, and none of it is wasted. Now, I came into this game thinking we'd spend most of our time talking about gear, and there was plenty of it. Like, I didn't even get into it, but the stadium has a giant Dante network distributing video and sound to all the suites, all the hallways, all the TVs and displays everywhere. But more fascinating to me, I saw little creative flourishes all over the place. Ingenious solutions like sticking a camera on the scoreboard clock for a reference instead of trying to sync timing signals between like the truck and the scoreboard. And all these solutions were made by people. All part of the team trying to make every Blues game an exciting experience, whether you're at the Enterprise Center or you're watching at home. I'd like to give a special thanks to Chris Bailey and Trevor Nickerson, who helped us put together this video, but also to the entire Blues organization, the team at Mobile TV Group, FanDuel Sports Midwest, and really everyone we talked to. It was a great experience, and I can't wait to watch the next Blues game.